morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where Marvel once again dominates the headlines. And that's because everyone's trying to figure out what the heck they have planned next. Yes, Marvel and Kevin Feige have been uncharacteristically quiet about their future plans, leading everyone to mass speculation. But it seems we're closing in on our theories and getting very close to uncovering what Feige actually has planned. And it's very exciting. And if he pulls this off, it'll be yet another gold star on what's becoming a pretty golden resume. But I have to warn you, this first story is going to have potential spoilers in it. So if you want to maintain your virgin ears for Avengers Age of Ultron, I say two things to you. One, good luck. And two, skip ahead to the second story. Maybe even the third if you want to be entirely safe. For the rest of you, let's discuss. All right, so there's been a lot of speculation about what's going to happen at the end of Avengers Age of Ultron. And this is why Feige is being so quiet, because there's a big surprise at the end of the film and he doesn't want to give it away by saying what the upcoming films are going to be post-Avengers Age of Ultron besides Doctor Strange, because he doesn't want to reveal what is going to hopefully surprise audiences at the end of Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, this is the spoiler territory. We're entering it now officially. You've been warned several times. Okay, so the rumor is that we're heading into Marvel Civil War. And the way that Avengers Age of Ultron will end, I've discussed this at length in a special video about a potential Marvel Civil War. You can check out the link in the video description to watch that. But the rumor is that at the end of the film, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers will come to an impasse and they'll decide to form separate teams and go up against each other. And the big reveal is who's going to be on Cap's team, maybe even on Tony's team, but I think the planned reveal is Cap's team, and then Tony will go and recruit as necessary. And we're expected to maybe see characters like Captain Marvel, aka Carol Danvers. She's heavily rumored to be in this new group. It's gone through several incarnations apparently already in the lineup, and she is the most consistently included member. Black Panther, and then of course I think we can assume that Falcon would of course be on Captain America's group as well. And where would Doctor Strange go? Perhaps he'd go with the Hulk and Tony over on that team, which would obviously be the better team, at least in my choice. And then, you know, it's fun. It's very smart for Marvel because it creates who's your favorite team. And as some of you have said, you know, almost like a draft. You know, you get to speculate as to what characters will go where. But anyway, this plays into new rumors that are coming down, fresh rumors that are also starting to emerge that, again, all play into this idea. So we've explained the quietness over at Marvel, and we've explained, where these new characters are that everyone's been asking about, and why don't we have any more movies announced? Where are you introducing these characters? All right, so that's one thing. So the new rumor is that Avengers 3 will not feature any of the major Avengers characters except for Tony Stark. Now, the excuse that everyone's using is that Robert Downey Jr.'s contract speculates that he has to be in Avengers 3. I believe he only signed on for 2 more Avengers movies. They could bench him conceivably for another film and go with a whole new group. But once again, I think this proves that Iron Man is the spine of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they just really don't want to make a movie without him if they can help it. His movies are still the most successful, by far and away. And I'm talking worldwide. It's a little frustrating that people like to cherry pick the numbers, especially the media. The media will go around saying, oh, well, this movie's the highest grossing movie of the year, and they're only referring to domestic. I think as Hollywood becomes increasingly a global business where you see movies make the majority of their money overseas, I think that it's not fair to only speak to a certain category without at least saying that that's the criteria for the comment. But anyway, Iron Man is still the most successful character in terms of financials at least. I know some of you aren't so happy with the changes that have been made with Tony Stark, most notably the Mandarin, but I think people are becoming increasingly dissatisfied with the Iron Man movies, which is why I don't think Robert Downey Jr. wants to make them anymore. But I think that Marvel's like, well, let's try and have a different team of Avengers, but Tony Stark will be there anyway, just to make sure everybody comes. Now, I think that speaks also to maybe them still not having a lot of faith in Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth and even Scarlett Johansson, that they feel that they could not be in the film and people would be okay with that. Even Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner. I think that's a huge leap, and I think to totally switch out the team is very risky. But I think Marvel, they take these risks not to see if they can do it, but in an effort to keep things fresh and for people not to tire of what's becoming a copious amount of films. So that rumor, again, is that Avengers 3 will only feature non-Avengers characters that Tony will be leading. Perhaps it'll be his new team. And the idea is not to, the official idea, or semi-official according to this rumor, because it hasn't been officially announced, is that this is to keep people from getting tired of Captain America and getting tired of Thor. But I guess nobody's worried about getting tired about Tony Stark. Although, if his contract holds and he does not renew, which it probably seems unlikely at this point, unless they offer him a ton of money, and we'll see how his other slate of films do outside of Marvel, he'll have a better picture, a clearer picture of what his career is going to look like post-Marvel at that point. I guess they feel that they don't have to worry about overexposing people to Tony because, this is the end of his run. And he'll go out with a big bang. And there's also that rumor of 2 films, which I've discussed before, which I think is probably true and very smart way to get a little bit more Robert Downey Jr. out of that contract. A single shoot that you break up into 2 films. So I'm curious to what you guys think of this rumor. What do you think of, Marvel trying to switch up the lineup of the Avengers? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you want to see a different lineup? And also, who do you are the Avengers that have to be on the team? Are you going to be like, but I like seeing Black Widow. I like seeing Bruce Banner's Hulk. He hardly gets any time as it is, although people are saying he'll be off planet at that point, and so maybe they don't want to reveal anything like that. The problem with these revealing future films is that you are going to maybe reveal key plot points. For instance, you could reveal Planet Hulk, and that's, I think, a storyline a lot of us feel would be perfect for the Bruce Banner character and for Mark Ruffalo to really sink his teeth into. And that would maybe lead into World War Hulk. I mean, they do have plans internally till 2028, and I'm sure maybe there's a World War Hulk in there somewhere, but actors age. This isn't like comic book characters, and so for Mark Ruffalo, that's over 10 years from now. And I guess so the other aspect of this is they're saying Marvel doesn't want to recast, they want to just bring up new characters. And I guess they've made these characters from the C team to the, they leapfrogged B to making them the A team with their Avengers. There's a lot of speculation at the beginning that this wouldn't work out, so maybe they could do the same with other characters. But I think to have characters completely disappear, unless you're going to kill them off, I think that's the only way this would maybe work. If death in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was forever, if it did stick, unlike the comics, of course, where they're constantly resurrected. So I'm just curious. I mean, this is a very different way to watch, to experience comic book material. And again, the interconnectedness of these movies I find fascinating. And as I've said before, I feel Marvel is turning movies into almost like watching a television show, that same experience where an extended story is broken up in different parts, usually week by week, but here will be throughout the year. Because, Marvel's releasing 2 to 3 movies a year, and they're clearly merging to the point where they're all telling the same story to some degree. Very, very interesting. All right, so the second story of the day spins out of this. And there's another rumor that's going hand in hand with this idea of changing up the lineup, and that's that Spider-Man might be a part of it. And that apparently Sony and Disney are in talks, preliminary talks. They're nowhere near the end of such an agreement, and they're just basically, I think at this point, you could call the talks exploratory. Now, of course, Sony is probably very eager to do this because their Spider-Man franchise is limping heavily. Of course, they've had to push back The Amazing Spider-Man 3. They're trying to launch the Sinister Six film, a female Spider-Man character having her own movie, and they seem to be moving away from Spider-Man as an actual character in his own cinematic universe. And the box office numbers just aren't simply there. Now, I would say if they actually sat down and watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2, they would notice that it's a talent, creative problem, not having anything to do with maybe fatigue of the character or Andrew Garfield. It's just the movie simply wasn't that great. And a little too cartoonish. I personally feel, especially with Electro, as you might recall from my review, it really ventured into Batman and Robin territory. And that's like saying, well, people are tired of Batman, obviously. It's like, no, people just didn't like what you did with him. So but Sony's like, hey, let's pick up the phone, let's call it Marvel. As I've said before, the rumblings behind the scenes that I've heard back when I was at Marvel was that Sony owns a part of the actual character. Marvel was in a very bad position when they sold off their film rights to Spider-Man and X-Men, and with the Spider-Man deal, Sony owns a piece of that character. So they're in business together forever. So I think that's probably why they would consider it that. Although, remember, Kevin Feige is a producer on over on the Deadpool film. And there's just the general idea, the theory that's also being put out there is that maybe Marvel is like, you know what, we're so powerful, we make so much money, and I think that we do that because we give the fans what they want, and the fans want to see all the characters together. So we're going to be the bigger person because we can afford to be, and we're going to just reach out and kind of like help all of our characters thrive in all different media from all different companies. That's a very altruistic idea, but I think at the end of the day it just goes to strengthen the Marvel brand. And also I think maybe on a less charitable note, they might be feeling that if they don't do this, these other companies might hurt the genre to such a degree that people won't want to see comic book movies anymore. I mean, that's a concern as well. Also, maybe just to tick off DC. I mean, it used to be just DC versus Marvel, Marvel Studios, but then if you start bringing in all these other companies and Marvel's helping them, it really becomes a tsunami of competing content that just will completely overshadow what DC's trying to do there. DC, very interesting to see how they're going to survive and what they're going to look like in this emerging landscape. But anyway, the Spider-Man deal, I think it's very curious to see if this will work out. But I have to tell you, I don't know how much I'd like to see him in the actual movie long term. I never even really liked Spider-Man in the Avengers comics. I feel he doesn't quite fit there. He really very much has his own universe. And he just, the style of Spider-Man stories are different. You know, that character is your average guy, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And a lot of his problems are always dealing with his own problems and his own internal grief and, you know, the grief he causes for the people in his life. Peter Parker is a very specific formula, and I don't know how it works in the you know, the larger picture at Marvel. Now, of course, people say he's a big part of Civil War, and so maybe that's where these conversations are also coming from. That they look at the comic and they go, well, how can we not have Spider-Man be a part of this? So the question is, will he be a part of it, and how big will he be? Will he just swing by in a cool scene? Andrew Garfield really wants to do it, and even Hugh Jackman has spoken to wanting to appear in the Avengers. Maybe there'll be something nice for him to do one last time before he hangs up his claws, although I don't see him hanging up his claws anytime soon. But, you know, these are all different things that maybe Marvel is considering. And but again, I think that Marvel has to be careful about not, you know, the difference between giving the fans what they want and fan service. That's a very fine line, and I'm not quite sure where it is exactly they'll cross it. But I do think that Hugh Jackman and Andrew Garfield are very well cast in their roles. Some of you might argue the Andrew Garfield point, but I think he's a great Peter Parker, and you know, it would be fun to see them in the roles, but, you know, these casts are getting quite big and a little unwieldy. That's another problem that could possibly stem from this. All right, so those are the first two stories of the day. Now we're into non-spoiler territory. All right, so welcome back, everybody who skipped ahead. You missed some fun stuff, but again, we don't want to ruin the movie for you. But this is a story that also broke about the impending cancellation of the Fantastic Four comic. Now, this has been a rumor for some time over at Bleeding Cool. It looks like they were right. Bleeding Cool does very good investigative journalism, in my opinion. A lot of people go to them to divulge news. You know, that's a funny thing. That's another story going on over at you know, Star Wars. They have posters up on the set saying "Loose lips sink starships," and I think that's a really fantastic thing to have up there, because of course there have been a number of Star Wars rumors that, you know, people are saying are legit and genuinely kind of ruin the upcoming movie, which, you know, we discussed. I mean, I think the stories take on a life of their own, and, you know, it's really hard to ignore them. So I really do think that, you know, these companies should implore their employees not to spill the beans, because it really does hurt the overall film. I mean, there have been very few movies that I think have gotten away with really fantastic surprises. So very interesting with Fantastic. Let's move back over to Fantastic Four. The reason why is it going to be canceled? Well, there's two sides to this. So, I think one is they're saying, well, the head of Marvel, who's actually now the biggest shareholder over at Disney, Isaac Perlmutter, it really just annoys him that Fox owns the rights to this property. And they've taken down all posters and artwork for the Fantastic Four within the Marvel offices and just doesn't want to even look at them. And I have to tell you, I've heard quite a few colorful stories about Mr. Perlmutter back at my time at Marvel. He is a very difficult individual, and this seems totally believable to me based on what I know of him from secondhand. And I have to say, one somewhat, I suspect, firsthand account with Isaac Perlmutter for me. Or at least I was directly affected. But anyway, moving on, the Fantastic Four rumored will be canceled, and now it looks like it will be canceled. And so they're going to get away. It's going to have some storyline called Fantastic Forever, and then they're going to give it a break and then bring it back. So a lot of people are upset, saying, you know, this is Marvel's first family, one of the first comics they ever put out, a defining building block in the company. How can you do that? How can you get rid of such a storied comic? And the Marvel Comics goes, well, you know what? We don't own the film rights to that. We're not going to give it any publicity or help give them any material for them to work with over in their films. And also, it looks like Fox is going in a totally different direction anyway. So the comic's not going to look anything like the movie. So it certainly won't help sales either. Now, here's the flip side of it. I don't think the Fantastic Four is a very good comic. I think people have struggled with this gallantly, but in vain, to modernize it, to make it something that people want to read. Now, I'm sure its numbers aren't horrible, but it's certainly not anything that ever, sparks conversation. No one's like, have you read the latest Fantastic Four story? Or like, what are the Fantastic Four going to do next? They're never really a part of any of the big crossovers. They never join the Avengers. They really just sit in, Baxter Tower and kind of have like a 1950s Leave It to Beaver sitcom mentality, which I think very much plays into how they were created. And, it speaks to the old saying, don't have your characters get married, don't have them have children, because it really limits what you can do with them. I don't think that's true. Obviously, I wrote a whole comic book about that, that partially spoke to that. But I think that when you have characters like the Fantastic Four that the company wants to protect, yes, then maybe your hands are tied. But I think we've seen numerous writers come into that space and try and do something with it, and they just have not been able to do it. So I think Fantastic Four, you have a situation where it might be, the catalyst, the final, or the straw that broke the camel's back might be like, we don't want to promote another company's movie, but I think the real root of the problem is that it's just not a great comic. It's just not working, and maybe it does need to be retired. I don't think you should keep things alive simply for the fact that they have some historical value. Those older comics will always be there. People can always enjoy the original runs of the Fantastic Four back when it did work as a comic. But to just continually drag it through the mud, I think is a mistake. And I think, to some degree, you might be able to argue that about Superman. All right, so there's something to think about. Let's go on to today's viewer question. This is actually from a couple days ago, but I saved it because I liked it quite a bit. And it's from Ibrahim Naiz. And Ibrahim says, "Hi Grace, question. Who decides whether a movie gets a sequel, prequel, or reboot, and how do they make that decision? For example, I read recently they want to make a I Am Legend reboot. Why? That movie just came out in 2007. I liked the movie, and I remember pretty much I remember the whole movie. Also, it was a big hit. Why not just make a sequel to that story that was well received?" Great question, Ibrahim, and I think it speaks to the changing Hollywood checklist for how to make a movie. So with this one, I think the reason they're considering a reboot is that Will Smith does not want to return. So they can't really make a sequel, and it was a long time ago. 2007 is 7 years ago. So to make a sequel to that, I mean, look how Sin City turned out. Sometimes you can wait too long to make a sequel. So they might say, well, if we reboot it, it'll seem fresher, and people won't have to be like, well, I saw that before. They'll be like, well, I didn't see this. This is a new version of it. Now, I would speak to the fact that I Am Legend, the only real selling point that made it unique was that Will Smith did star in it. Otherwise, it was just your typical zombie survivor movie. How is that any different than World War Z or Walking Dead, except their zombies look different? I don't think there's a huge difference, and so I don't know what the core concept is that you're rebooting there. What are you trying to save, except for maybe that their zombie franchise over at the studio? So that's why they would reboot it, because they go, you know what, Will Smith doesn't want to return, it's been a long time, this is going to make it seem fresh. And reboot is a hot word right now, so we'll slap that on all the stories and people will get excited. Now, the other reason they want to do I Am Legend is because I think this speaks to Hollywood growing reliance on brands. And I Am Legend, because it was successful, Abraham, and you do remember the movie, that to them is valuable. Sure, they could create a new property, but then they have to build name recognition, and it's somewhat risky. Here they can say, remember this movie? Although I think a lot of people didn't like the way the movie ended, as I recall, even though it was very successful. So they're like, remember this movie that you liked or you kind of liked? It made a lot of money and starred Will Smith? Well, we're going to do it again. And so they already have the groundwork laid for fans who've paid to see the material. It's almost like why Hollywood likes books so much, and adapting comic books and novels, news stories, because they speak to a success factor that already exists. TV shows. Everybody knows this TV show. They'll go see the movie. So I think that's what it is. I mean, it's sad to see Hollywood moving further and further away from original ideas, but at the same time, when's the last time that you paid to see an original movie? I think Gone Girl is a step in the right direction for that, but of course, then again, that's based on a novel. But original movies just don't do that well at the box office these days. All right, so thank you so much for your question, Ibrahim. I hope that kind of, gave you a little bit of a better perspective as to what's going on there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories. Please also, if you're going to write something that has to do with the Marvel stories, put a spoiler comment at the beginning, a spoiler warning at the beginning of your comment, so we don't ruin it for anyone who tried to skip ahead and preserve, as I said, their virgin ears. So write your comments down below with spoiler warnings if necessary of the top 3 stories, what you thought of the viewer question, and anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.